Thank you. And I'm pretty sure you are better in reading the title. So long title, but to make it short, as we heard yesterday, that apparently digitalization and together with internationalization could have also this not wanted colonialization aspects. Here we will see something different because Sri Lanka and especially Lanka with Chaminda and his team did much more digital work than we in Esslingen before the pandemic assumed to do with our students. So in that way, we are also more the learners and having the possibility to take and give, and we will go through that idea of that project on how we struggle, what challenges we had, and not so much in the real technical details of system thinking. I just go into that as far as we need that to understand what were the outcomes. Okay, so first of all, you know Germany, I guess, at least few of you. Sri Lanka, a little bit smaller than Germany, and also you see you have different languages, which makes it quite interesting, a huge variety of different religions. And here, if we go to the Global Development Index, there is a little bit a change. So we have different situations where we started. And we had also different situations in the idea of where and when we started digitalization of our lectures and how we lecture. In Esslingen, we are talking about MBA classes, overall MBA in international or industrial management. So that is the focus. We have really small groups normally, and we have a quite haptical approach, or we had. So we are doing a lot of project-based and problem-based learning, gamifications, and so on. Whereas that is just a small group of the MBA class at Colombo University, but they could have up to 60 people. So we have just maximum 25 in our MBA classes, up to 60 people, and they did already some digital lecturing. By the way, which means here you have, of course, less interaction. Here we have a lot of interaction. That was the starting point. And the next thing was that we had a visit of the MBA class of Colombo in Esslingen in 2019 with Chaminda and the class. And we showed them how we did that. We did some international projects on digitalization and had also especially digital transformation management, where we both are in a kind of practical way. So then we started to say, okay, we can do the classical way of lecture, exchange, and trying to learn from each other, and also use Lanka, Chaminda will tell about that a little bit later, foundation as real case basis for some simulations and activities. Yeah, and then we all know COVID struck us, and it was not possible to do this. We had mobility restrictions. We, and that was a good thing, had also to start doing online lectures. Colombo already did, and they managed to do this. Yeah, and then we had the possibility to apply for a DAAD EVAC project on this and saying, hey, let's take these challenges and try to see if we could do this simulation, this gamification, and project-based management in a digital way, and also with the idea of we are not going in this high-tech idea. So everybody was talking about what could you do and what different means you have, but let's see what you can do with ordinary available means of digitalization. So that was when it started, and then I will hand over to Chaminda to tell you a little bit about the first steps after our project started in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, so thank you, Siegfried. Basically, we had the opportunity at the beginning to have Professor Zürn in Sri Lanka as a part of the early planning stage. So when he visited, the original idea was just to use some lectures and have a basic planning, but we also did additional activities because when a person like him was in Sri Lanka, so there are a lot of demand for people to communicate and have lectures. So we did lectures to the university, professional organizations, and he visited our co-hosting or co-worker space at Fab Lab Markandura. That's a Fab Lab or maker space. And we also did some interviews. And so it was like a full-fledged visit by Professor Zürn. But then, maybe some of you know, in Sri Lanka, there was a huge crisis. It was like in many media channels was the headline. So I was also part of, with my team, part of the movement against the government. So we were able to throw the president away with the other cabinet ministers. So therefore, actually what we did was, it was an opportunity for us to use digital technologies to do a people's movement, non-violent people movement. So we use our concepts in the movement. It's still going on, but I will not go into details. But it was a distractor for our original plan of the project, but it was another opportunity we want to test our capabilities and digital technologies. Next one. So Fab Lanka, if I just mention about what we do, in addition to my teaching at University of Colombo, this is a non-profit social enterprise we co-founded with the objective of making Sri Lanka a maker society by using Industry 4 technology. So we mainly work with 3D printing. So we started the idea of this kind of work from 2014. As Professor Zürn mentioned, for example, we started using Zoom in 2017. I think we are the first group in Sri Lanka use Zoom. Before that, we used Google Hangouts. But so we have been using other technologies like 3D printing, system engineering, design thinking to educate not university people, but say young people in rural area from age 14 to 65 to link them and also empower them for different purposes. So I'll not go into details, but we have been doing this work for many years. I have my partners or colleagues in the US and also in Sri Lanka mainly. So we started in our lab in 2017, but in 2022, when we had this COVID, we were able to convert that from a small place to like a full-fledged lab in a rural area. Now I visit many labs in Germany when I come here from Berlin to Stuttgart. So our one is also kind of in par with those labs that we hear with the capabilities. Yeah. However, we have, as a non-profit small enterprise, we have a lot of challenges and obstacles. I have listed them. I will not go into details, but basically these are client-related technological issues, infrastructure problems, organizational transformation from a startup to like a standard organization now, of course, financial limitations, barriers not only in the lab, but also connecting to other people. There are a lot of challenges in the country, particularly due to the economical and financial crisis. Of course, we have expert issues and challenges of expanding our team. Okay, so we did some kind of brainstorming and strategizing on how to go ahead as an organization. You're going to talk about, okay. Yeah.
So that was the idea, and one step back. So you see, client-related barriers was also how to approach, if you go there, those clients. Chaminda said about the youngsters, underprivileged, trying to promote them by technical means. So it was not the classical way, it was really by technology. We are convinced all that technology could help and is a possibility, but all the rest. So in the end, together with Chaminda and also Kreshan, we will see him later, the other co-founder of Fab Lanka, discussing on what should be changed in the business model. We call it business model, but let's say just in the strategy of Fab Lanka Foundation. And four major questions come up. That was what should become the main revenue streams in the future, because up to now it is based mainly on, let's say, the donors of the founders and some others. So then what should be the key product developments for that? Because Lanka is giving teaching possibility, but also with the 3D printing technology, they produce something for local enterprises. So could this be something where to go? Then the question is how to expand Lanka, because if you want to reach rural areas, you have to be not in one rural area, but you have to spread this. And the other question is how to roll out relevant Industry 4.0 technologies. That has to do with the idea when all started. I think all were be a little bit over-optimistic in the part 3D printing will really play in digitalization. Now there could be others in the makers idea or maker society also of developing countries. So in the end, and that was when we and the students of Esslingen also stepped in, because we have a strong focus on system thinking approaches in that way. And I just have here one sentence of Edward Demings, so a quality management guru, saying, okay, everybody's doing normally the best, especially if you have a lot of volunteers, but the problems are within the system. So you have to think the whole system and not just having individual ideas to go further on. Okay. We are not talking about system thinking in detail, but just that you have an idea what we did later in our collaboration. The idea was we have a lot of different mental models. Each of us has our own mental model of something we want to do together. So if we do this, we have to cope with that system, with all these mental models. So we have to go and communicate. That's where we try to do that virtual with all the stakeholders, to come up with a common model. And with that, you can try to see if that matches with the system you're working in this case, digitalization in a developing country in rural areas. And in the end, we said we want also a simulation on that. Why a simulation? Because you have some questions. With the current status, you know, hopefully a target where you want to go. And then you can do activities. Activities, actions you plan. On the other side, events or incidents, COVID-19, other things that hit you and change. So it would be good to evaluate also your action concerning to different scenarios, classical approach, and you get hopefully some answers and new questions. So that is system thinking in a, let's say, nutshell. First part of the project was we had 2 master theses running on elaborating systems on that. So one was really implementation of dynamic capabilities for that, and you see the case study of Lanka Foundation. I'm not going into all these points Rohini was working out and trying to combine. And the second master thesis, here a German one, is with a broader approach, not specifically for Lanka, but Lanka was one of the cases he used to take the classical business model canvas, but trying to derive specific elements within that and in a system thinking approach connect them with each other. And then the idea was to discuss with the people from Lanka and Sri Lanka the weight of all these connections and activities, actions, because we are not in a startup, but in a small situation or small company or organization that has to do the next step. So that was the idea. And then what did we do for that? It was meant to be physically at the beginning, but then we go to these virtual aspects in that project. So we had a kind of setup where here we have the students in Esslingen. We had the FAB Lanka team connected to us. You see some technical equipment, but not really fancy one, so all standard we use normally here. We had also then Gresham, who is also a co-founder of FAB Lanka, and he's a manager with Boeing in Seattle, but Sri Lankan. And he pushed that. He gave the idea to the students of what is the basic, what was the management team thinking doing that. By the way, Chaminda, in the meantime, also created a case study on FAB Lanka for teaching that is available, so we took also that one. And that was the first startup for the class. So we had a huge community from the US, from Sri Lanka, I think India was connected, and Esslingen to get the setting. So that was the first step. And then the more important one was our joint on-site and virtual teamwork. So you see here, again, people from Esslingen joining with here FAB Lanka or students from Colombo. And yeah, quite interesting. So you had different groups and the same setting on the other side. I will come to that later, that we have physical teams, not individuals that do their connections digital as we know it in many cases, but having physical teams, and I guess this is one of the keys, or the key learnings we had. By the way, just some, for curiosity, a nice thing, I have here student from Turkey, and she had some difficulties with the English at that point, so doing the simulation part, discussing with the people. She also made a kind of translation with Google Translator, or yeah, it's Google Translator from Turkish into English, and we're trying to do this. Simple means taking just what is available. So doing this, I think in very short time, and that is important, they came up with quite good ideas. So that was then transferred, so it's a whiteboard and transferred. And they did some classical approaches to evaluate different ideas. And then in one of these master thesis simulations, we created different scenarios that were given from Sri Lanka and from FAB Lanka people on what could happen. Don't forget, in Sri Lanka, you have now not 12 hours, but at some stages, 12 hours of power cut, which makes it not easy. So other things we have to have in mind, and different scenarios, and try to see what those different activities the joint groups provide for the company for the next steps, easy ones, with low budget, we have to say, on the different elements. And it was not then the case to say, hey, that's good and we want to be better, but the idea of that system thinking is, if you see here deviations from your normal classical strategic approaches, that's the moment where you should go into your reflection and think, what did I forget, or is there anything in the scenario I have to think of? Because one thing is sure, a big company could lose money. A small, like FAB Lanka, just at the moment built on, let's say, private funds, if they make an error, it will not be, it is for sure, the end of that idea. So that was what was in there. And now if we take that together, we want to give you lessons learned from the didactic and technical point of view, because we started from the idea of having this as a kind of digitalization project, but I think we got more out for how to set up future collaborations in that way.
Yeah, basically now, I will not go into detail because of limited time, but basically we talk about, when you talk about developing country and developed countries, always about differences. So we try to compare, like, what is the size of the bandwidth, or what is the speed of the processing power, those kind of things. But what we found was actually there are a lot of similarities you can connect to degree of collaboration. If you directly compare or rank, then maybe there are differences, but there are, for example, let's say, we have low budget equipments where in Germany you have high-tech equipment, but still you can work together. And also,
students had the possibility to find similarities, because the idea was if we compare them and take them together, they will say, hey, it's completely different. So starting with that similarities, yeah.
And also, as Professor Zürn was discussing yesterday in informal discussion, that now people from other countries, particularly developing countries, are more enthusiastic, more technically savvy. So you can look at those attitudes to have relationships. Yeah, basically now things like system thinking and even modeling and simulation actually are a good way. What we learn is where rapidly people come together, regardless of the barriers of the language, orientation, interest, but they quickly come together because they have something common to fight together. So that is, I think, very good than standard lectures or conventional teaching.
The same situation in that way. We want to have brainstorming virtually cross cultures, cross languages. So, and the idea was how to do this. If you start with a kind of framework, and simulations are a kind of framework, you reduce, let's say, the hurdles for the people, and they have something they could start with. So that was, I think, a good idea on that.
Now, we talk about planning in projects, now standard planning. I'm also a teacher of project management, but in conventional planning, it's not going to work in international collaboration, because we are living in a very volatile societies with different factors, like in countries like Sri Lanka, in addition to bomb blasting, COVID-19, financial crisis. So still we have to work together with the deadline by DAAD and other organizations. So we have to do dynamic planning, more agile planning in our projects.
Especially if you do digital, I think everybody knows this, and who joined the session before lunch in the room 3 knows how agile you have been. They had difficulties with the slide, then the video gave the audio, but the presenter was the same time apparently recorded and re-audited, so it was yeah, so digital things you never ever know, and even in that setup we had, I did everything in the hybrid room in Esslingen, and I was convinced everything works. Yeah, that was the mistake I did. And then we moved around, and that's why I said low level. We had the smartphones, worked better than our system with the whiteboard and transfer, so keep it simple. And didactics or technology learnings. So, as Chaminda already said, of course we need some digitalization in crises, but if you do simulations and if you run, we are not going to show you the simulations, but it was a step-by-step, and they see what they did really, the students. It helps really also to have this knowledge transfer. And that was a knowledge transfer that started, and I insist, started from Sri Lanka to Esslingen and then back, not the other way around. And I think that was also a good learning for the Esslingen student, by the way, all internationals, so of all areas. I will come to that later. This one, yeah, technological capabilities could enhance or could make it difficult, but you could do all those things with basic means. If you are creative, or if your students are creative, or if you have creative people, especially from not as saturated by technological history as we may have it here in Europe, areas. So, take it simple. I will do this again and again, but for sure not in hybrid rooms. This is, for me, crucial from all the aspects. If you have individual people trying to join digitally, you get a handful, the very brave ones and the enthusiastic, and the rest is hiding. Even if you do breakout sessions, whatever, it works, and it works well if you have kind of hotspots in each area. 3 or 4 people together. We were anxious that they will talk then and they will exclude the others that are online or vice versa. It was not the case. A group on both sides, because then you have this peer stimulation, which apparently also works cross, let's say, the technical media. So that was one thing for us, very important to do this in small groups. Yeah, and here to stimulate this, I think, yeah, we all know as lecturers here, we have to learn a lot to facilitate those things. We have our perceptions, and yeah, I think I'm more or less one of the oldest, or even the oldest here in the room, for sure. We have so many assumptions about our experiences. We have to learn to really be experienced facilitators with those medias. Why? Because we can now say, yeah, the students are the digital natives. They are. But we still set some goals they should learn. And even if we want to do that in a collaborative learning, we have to know how to use this and how to guide them to use it correctly. So this is, for me, very important if we want to go beyond what we do today, just to give some online lectures or try to have breakout sessions and really be on eye level with all stakeholders, especially when we have stakeholders here that are from industry, that are school students, that are students in universities, and that maybe even externals. So yeah, that's a little bit, and more or less in time, I guess. Or you want to add something
just
on that?
everything's fine, yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there, yeah. A round of applause. Thank you for this interesting presentation. Are there any questions so far? Or in the chat maybe? No, I don't think so.
Just to add maybe a comment now, in addition to, now when we say digital, we automatically assume it is digital, and international we say it's remote, just virtual. But I think that don't work because the technology cannot solve the teaching problem, so knowledge transfer. So we need to have also, as Professor mentioned, there should be a trust among the stakeholders. So it should be between facilitators, students. So having this kind of physical interaction and also shared experiences physically will be very useful in having virtual collaboration. Otherwise, the work between unknown strangers with different diversified interests will be like not very effective.
Okay, that is that you can use it. That you can use it really good if you have at least, as I said, some points of connections already. Otherwise, you start with completely wrong perception. Back to our own, in system thinking, mental models. And mental models, I think you still have to meet physically to overcome this. But when you did this, I think that is an easy way to collaborate. And we shouldn't forget we started all this idea also because most of the Sri Lankan students are not capable to really travel to see that, financial reasons, but at the moment also all the other situations behind.